Yes. Also, Chris, I think, is muted, so careful there. Go. Yes.
Okay, now you can hear me.
Let's see.
Yes. Hello.
Let's.
Hi. Uh, I was doing so well. Why
Hello.
does it always happen when I'm doing well?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
It was so
I'll
good.
restart.
It was good. It was so natural. But you can
First
try again.
Let's pretend this is the first try. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Code with Italians. Except that today is not just yet another episode of Code with Italians, but it is the first episode of a series that we call Design with Italians. Well, we call it informally like that. I don't think there's it's written anywhere, but we are here because one of the things that developers have to deal with is not just the code, but also we have to develop the interface that users will see. And not everyone has the luxury of having a full-blown design team that can help them. And even if they do, they don't necessarily know the language. There is sometimes a disconnect between designers and developers when talking about things. And we thought that is very important for everyone out there to be able to communicate properly with their designers if they have them, or if they don't have designers, at least have the basics to understand what they would need to do to create or improve their app, improvising themselves as designers. But also at some point you should probably get a designer if you can. So this series is going to be aired on Wednesdays every other week. So the next episode is going to be in 2 Wednesdays. The first Wednesday of November, I think, is the 3rd. And we are also PSA. We're going off next week because I'm going to be at DroidCon London speaking. Also, by the way, if you're in London, I just received these bad boys. So if you like stickers, I have more stickers.
We also have another ticket to give away. If somebody is still, we have one more ticket for London. So
good. So
probably gonna give it away.
Just keep an eye on the chat, because I guess Ivan is going to be giving away the ticket at some point. Okay. So just last thing with, yes, we are streaming on Sunday, Mark, and the guest is going to be Mark. So yes, we are going to be streaming on Sunday with Mark, and then we're going to be on a break next week on Wednesday and on Sunday. What was I saying? Oh, yes. In this series, we are going to get a lot of help from this person up here. Hi, Chris. Do you want to introduce yourself? No.
Okay, I'm not muted anymore. Okay. I'm Chris Sinco. I'm an interaction designer on the Android Studio team. So work with developer tools, but also with designers. I've worked with Liam and several folks on the material design team. Oh, actually, I shouldn't introduce Liam for he can do it himself. Sorry.
No spoiler.
But yeah, also work on Jetpack Compose, and I thought this stream was super interesting because it's kind of talking about Compose, and I think a big part of Jetpack Compose is that we wanted to make it easier for developers to build beautiful apps with animations and theming and more complex layouts, but also something that's material first as well. So with that, we have Liam here.
Yeah, hi. I'm here. It is no longer a secret. I'm Liam. I work as a design advocate on Material and also occasionally as a platform designer on Material. And on the side, besides Google, I'm a type designer, so I'm very into type and had it.
Yes, Liam is by far the best person to have here with us today, I think, because can I call you a type nerd? Is that bad?
Sure. I would call myself
good,
that.
good. Okay, so I think unless Ivan, you have anything else to add, I think we can get going. And we can start with the big question, which is, Liam, what is typography and why is it important? AKA, why should I care?
I think, especially in the context that we're going to be talking about, which is like software, I consider typography to be the use of type, like the use of written language in interface. Why should we care? Because I think that type is interface. You would have to get really creative to create an interface that doesn't use any type when it's software. Like there's not a person standing there communicating with you through any other means. So your interface is probably going to be made out of type. And luckily, I think the platforms that we typically build for have already done a lot of work on making sure that typography that's functional exists for you, but there's so much more you can do based on the type of app that you're making, the type of content that your app has, your design intent, your creative vision, all those things to make it even better.
That is a fairly big bar for a topic. It's like essentially type is the big thing, as you said, is something that if you have something to say, you probably want to write it somewhere and explain it to people. One thing that I always find fascinating is the relationship between typography and the structure that gives to the information that you present to people. I know that material design has opinions on that, and maybe we can also share the material design website. I'll fetch it up and put it on screen while we talk. But I will let you talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say in terms of like the material system, we've tried to think about how type is used in interface and come up with something.
Yeah, I don't know why, but
Liam audio's gone.
okay. Now they
I
can hear you again.
So
I really don't know what's
cool.
going on with OBS today. It's not very cooperative. Sorry.
Okay.
It's one of those days.
I guess I'll just keep
I'll
talking.
keep an eye on the levels just in case
if something happens. Yeah. I was just going to say, like, I think the heart of the way that Material tries to systemize type is through a type scale, which is certainly not a necessarily new concept in the world, but it's something that I think can be really useful for interface. And basically what that is like, I think, Yvonne, you were talking like just before the call about how do you know, like, do I need an H3 or a subtitle or a caption or all of those things?
Yes.
And I think sometimes we can present this type scale as something that you need to like create first before you can make an app. But I think actually, like in real life practice, if you're building something from scratch, it's a good opportunity to just like make the thing and then see what you're doing and then make that into a type scale and further systematize the thing that you've created. So like, for example, you're building your first app from scratch and you have no idea like what type styles you need or what they should be. My advice is honestly to just like get started and make like put the content into the app that you want to put in there, see how it feels, see the ways that you need to separate or emphasize or de-emphasize or create a hierarchy for the things that you have, which like we can talk more about in a second. And then through that, you'll probably end up with a bunch of reused styles that you've used in multiple places in the app. And that can become your type scale.
So you will advise me to just start and then kind of adjust over, because I'm no designer, so I can't be like, preemptively, oh, this is gonna be this, or this is gonna be, I don't want to say like font weight or font size, that kind of, I don't even know the jargon, but I have a rough idea of maybe what I want to do with a card view or something like that, right? Because I can check the Material.io website, so there is a lot of stuff there, but then it gets overwhelming, right? And there is a lot of try and error, but with try and error, there is also a lot of uncertainty. Like, is it gonna be right? Does it look okay to me because I don't know how to do it, or is it actually legit, right? There is a lot of uncertainty around the choices that I make. It doesn't happen at work. Sebastiano was very, very clear. If you have a designing team, you're just sailing, right? You're just enjoying the ride. But
I hope so.
Well, yeah, especially if you have things like, a design system, or, you can build, I'm lucky enough to have a team where we build a lot of the stuff at the beginning, right? You build styles, you build things, so you don't have to pick everything from Figma all the time. You just have, okay, this is a title, they went through, I don't know how many iterations before. I just know that we have a title. It's going to be, I don't know, H3, I say H3. But the idea is that, you have already these Lego blocks that you use. When it comes to, it's Sunday morning, I want to code on my pet project, it gets overwhelming very quickly. So this is why I'm here, by the way.
Sure.
Shameless plug. Please teach me.
I feel like if that's the situation, then like you have a great source of information in the thing, like whatever you're working on at work. And that is like, you wake up Sunday morning and you want to work on your pet project and you're thinking like, oh my God, what should this type style be? Look at like the components and the styles that you're using at work and like figure out why the type styles are the way that they are. Like if you look at, there's an example somewhere on the material site. I've like no idea what page it's on right now, so we don't have to look at it. But
actually, I think a good example on the material side, I'm just looking at it, is the card component, since we haven't talked about card.
Yeah, I was thinking about like a weather card that is. This is also like great user research right now. Like, how quickly can you find the card component?
I will tell you a secret, Liam. I don't always find what I'm looking for on the material website.
Now, see, this is interesting. I would like to know more about that, but maybe it has nothing to do with typography.
I don't think so.
But you
I would say maybe scroll up and go to the component section.
That's right. I was looking for it on the side here because at some point in the past you used to have that top level navigation here as well. If I don't, so just muscle memory, I guess then. And cards.
Here you go.
Okay.
Yeah, the interactive demo, I think, is if you click all those buttons, all the checkboxes, I mean.
Oh yeah, click everything.
Yeah, usually, this is where everything starts for me, okay? So I have a card and I have an image and then there is a title but then what? right? But there is, okay, so I know that, the title is black, subtitle is kind of smaller and is gray. But is it caption? Is it H3? Should I, is it even robot? I can't even know if this is the default font, right? Because I'm absolutely,
Clueless?
I don't know. I don't know the stuff. Yeah, clueless. Let's say clueless. uh, but I don't think I'm the only one. I mean, if I'm the only one, probably it's not even a problem and we can go home happy. But I don't think I'm the only one that struggles so much because, we're more like, okay, I can run Android Studio, so I can build Android apps, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like these examples are using specific styles, right? But the thing that I want to say is like if you look at the composition of the card, you can notice like, yeah, the title is bigger, the subtitle is bigger and a different color, like to de-emphasize it. There are different font weights coming in, which is like maybe a bit more nuanced. But I think about type also as like a compositional tool to help you make sure that content like looks balanced to you. It can also be a tool to help people consume the information on screen in the order that it's intended to be consumed or in order of its importance. So thinking about like the parameters that you have, they would allow you to accomplish those goals. And then I would say like if you don't feel confident in your own eye for it, just like ask someone else and say like if you look at this, what are you reading first and second and third, and like what are you getting from this? And then if you ask your users and they get your intent, then it worked, right? And I think making those reused styles into a type scale can then just like help to tighten up the rest of the app where those kind of conventions are being used, if that makes sense.
Thank you for the sub, Mr. Zizou. We have a couple of questions from the chat, and I think the second one is more related to what we were talking about. And I want to say, I think what they're saying is they're struggling with the whole concept of design, which I understand it's a lot of stuff, and I don't know. I personally think that to a point, developers can be designers and designers can be developers as well. But obviously, each of those two disciplines is a world in and by themselves, and nobody knows everything when they start. So I don't know. Maybe you have some suggestions on what to do. Besides the obvious, try and try again. That will eventually get you the feel, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. I would say like what we're trying to do on material.io is like set up I want to use the word materials, but like something to help acquaint you with how to think about these things in a way. And I would also say like, as I said, well, first of all, I mean, the like artist part of me, because I think like my design is heavily influenced by a background in art, and I will like, this is a hill that I will die on, that design is in fact art. But the artist in me wants to say like, if you create something and it looks good to you, like that's great. And the way to know if it works for others is just to share your work. And I think this is something that like designers learn too pretty early on, is like the only way to actually get better is to share your work with other people. So there's never going to be a point, I think, yeah, where you say like, oh, this is perfect and I haven't asked anybody if it's good or not, but I know that it's perfect, so I'm going to put it out there and it goes 100%. Like I think that's a super important part of the process. Besides trying and trying again, is just like sharing and asking for feedback and knowing like when and how to do that, and importantly, how to receive the feedback. I think is like a huge step in starting to understand that stuff.
That's a big skill to have, like knowing how to get feedback and how to ask for feedback in the first place.
The biggest thing that I learned is just like, if you initiate a design critique, like the baseline rule is that we are critiquing the work and not the person, even though it's very easy to become like personally present and invested in your work. Keeping that in mind, I think, makes it a lot easier.
That's very true also on code reviews, so I can relate.
I think
so
designers go through similar things. Like developers go through code review all the time. Designers go through design review all the time. I think the trial and error is actually just part of the practice. It might seem like it's a lot of trial and error, but that's actually what designers do pretty consistently. Even as an individual, like you might go through 5 iterations just on your own and not like any of them. But you have to, I think part of it is just trying it out, seeing how it feels. Because, sometimes we talk about ideas in design, but like it's always, at some point you have to actually draw it and then visualize it and communicate it to somebody. So, I think if people do feel they are struggling and there's a lot of trial and error, that's actually kind of typical. I think as you get better as a designer, you probably make decisions faster and maybe iterate a little less because, you've relied on your background and your experience. But, there was a time years ago when I was just starting out where I was making a lot of mistakes, but I think things like material design are nice because it kind of gives you a great baseline of like where you can start to think about design. But I think materials also meant to say like the whole point of materials, like it's a solid foundation, but you should really kind of make it your own based on your personality and what you're looking into.
I would also say that
I like.
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Because the same person in the chat said, yeah, I guess, but as a coder, I want to code. I don't want to go into that design rabbit hole. So I guess what I would say to that is like the good or bad news is that whatever you produce is in fact going to be designed regardless. So it's just like the level of intentionality that you want to have there. And if it's less, it's less, but you will in the end have something that is designed.
There was one question by Mark a few minutes ago that that connects to what Chris just said about the more you do it, the more you can rely on your course experience. So you need to do fewer iterations, and that feels to me like at some point you will see emerging patterns, right? And that. I guess it connects to what Mark was asking about. I pick a heading font. If I have like some set of hints to pick, maybe the body font. Those are things that they go together. He's calling font pairings, right? Something like does it exist? I mean, is it a thing? Would I see those patterns emerge the more I do it?
Yes.
Nice. Like, I'm very good at asking open questions, as you can see.
No, it's more than I'm better at giving like annoyingly closed answers, perhaps. But I love this topic. I think, as like I said before, the type is a compositional tool, but type, as in like a typeface itself, is itself a composition. And I think like a good composition is balanced in some way. And I would say that type is the same. So if you're thinking about font pairing, I think my approach is to look at the composition of the typeface, meaning like what are its qualities, what are its characteristics. In a heading font, that's going to be much easier because maybe you're using a display font that has a lot of details that very readily stand out to you. If you're using a body font, they're going to be more nuanced things like the shape of the terminals or, the geometry that's prevailing over round or arched or flat
I think,
shapes.
Liam, it might be worth explaining a bit those terms, because you just mentioned a number of type design for terms that might not be clear to everyone.
So basically, like, you can think of most typography. Well, most type is based on a system of strokes, and those strokes are like the way that those strokes are rendered is based on, in most cases, writing tools that were used historically. I don't know if we need to get into that whole thing, but when I say like terminal shapes, I mean like the ends of those strokes. So like an S could be drawn as one stroke, so that the beginning and the end of the S would be the terminals in that case. Some typefaces have round terminals, some have flat ones, some have serifs, some have no serifs. If you look at the details of those things between your heading and body, or even like within the smaller parts of your type scale, you can start noticing the details of other typefaces and try to balance those out, either by creating a pairing where both typefaces share characteristics or in fact are from the same typeface, just different weights. Or you could complement it with a totally different typeface that might have features that contrast with the heading typeface. Does that make sense?
So maybe we can do some examples. The one obvious one that I can think of is on most, if not all, Google product pages, they use a custom font that I think is called Google Sans, and they are pairing that with itself in different weights, right? So if one opens the Google Store, you will see Google Sans everywhere. Do you have another example, maybe of the different kind, like using two different families, and maybe you have some specific suggestions for people about I don't know, maybe Google Fonts suggests pairing sometimes, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. Like, the pages for each typeface on Google Fonts do recommend like common pairings based on like which typefaces appear together. But you can also, I'm just opening up something that I had written about this. I think a good example might be something like fortnightly. If you go back to the material site.
And I will share it with everyone as well. Okay.
If you scroll up to the top nav and go to design. This is also a tutorial.
Thank you.
On how to use material.io. You click on material studies. And then fortnightly. And then typography. So this app uses two typefaces, like two different type families throughout the app, Libra, Franklin, and Merriweather, for things like headlines and body styles. Yeah, the type scale might be good to look at. And I think this is a successful pairing. These are two typefaces that have, I would say, similar proportions to one another, but one of them is obviously a serif typeface. They use it in much heavier weights compared to the sans serif typeface. They're also using it in italic. So this, I mean, if you look at like H1, a lot of the serif details, the curved strokes on like the 1 or the E really stand out compared to the more like rational and straightforward sans serif typeface. Something that's interesting about this also, which is interesting to note, is that they have two body styles that are different from one another. They use different typefaces. And I think there's an example somewhere in this article of like why that is, but it's essentially that they have multiple types of content that need to be presented at that size, like meaning that like they're both body text, like they need to be able to be read a paragraph at a time or more. But they're different types of content that they want to differentiate. Yeah, right here, that GIF.
Oh, I see.
So for the body of an article, they're using the serif typeface that is like really easy to read. And then for like this little contextual card, they're using a separate typeface that's like an explanatory caption almost.
So those are both body 1 and body 2, but being different fonts, they are basically completely different. So, but the idea of balancing with a title or a subtitle, it's still working because they are scaled appropriately, even if they are 2 different fonts.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's also just a cool example of how type can communicate like what kind of information you're looking at. Like it can be a subtle cue that's not explicitly stated anywhere.
I wanted to ask you something. So something that I don't see that often is something that here instead is quite clear, which is not all the headlines use the display font. Rather, the H1, H3, and H6 use the display font, so the more, let's say, baroque choice of the two. Whereas H2, H4, H5 use the body font, which is the sans serif, and also the sans serif font seems to be used with a lesser weight than the serif counterpart. Is that something that like it's done for a specific reason beyond aesthetics, I guess? And I was wondering if you have more insights into that, because I'm curious now.
It's been a while since I looked deeply into like the full set of mockups for this app, but I think that the reason for this is that often these headline styles that are using the sans serif typeface are in contexts where there are like multiple headlines in a row or like in one composition where you would need something that can be quickly read in a dense environment, whereas the display styles with the serif typeface are often on like individual article pages or highlighted stories or something like that, where you're really supposed to focus on one headline.
I find this interesting because it kind of highlights how H1 and H2, it doesn't mean that H2 is going to sit hierarchically just underneath an H1. It's just used for different things. And there is flexibility in the typesetting here that otherwise one would think, oh, H1 is bigger than H2 and H3 is smaller than H2, and that's how it has to be.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a super important point. Like H1 through 6 are just there because you might need 6 different headline styles. And I guess like size is just one like really quick heuristic way to organize them.
Got it. Thank you. This was actually a very, very good example because I don't know if it's just proximity that is inspiring me questions that I've never asked myself before, but it's really good. You're getting some compliments from the chat, by the way, on the design of Fortnightly. I have to agree, it's really, really nice. It has a distinct New York Times vibe to it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't take credit, but I'm sure that the team listening appreciates it.
They're also asking, well, they're not asking, they're just saying that they cannot find Android implementation of that toolbar. And I'm just trying to figure out which one.
Oh, I think it's right there.
The
actually.
cut one?
This
Yeah,
short.
the one that
Yeah,
collapses.
so this one
Yeah.
here.
Chris, do you know how this is implemented? Because I have a guess, but I don't know for sure. So
I do not. That's definitely not a top app bar,
my
or at least I don't think that's how it behaves.
my feeling was that maybe the top app bar was actually a sheet, and this is like a collapsed state of that sheet. But I can't say
As in,
100%.
it, like as
I
you
don't
scroll
know.
down, it collapses to the smaller size.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it like scoots over and becomes this. Maybe has like a shape transform.
Well, the good news is that's really easy to do in Compose. The bad news is it might not be as easy
Yeah,
to
bro,
do without Compose.
pretty
Yeah.
much what I was thinking. I was like, I don't know. Maybe we can do it in Compose, right? And then on the other side, I was like, please don't ask to do it in XML because I'm gonna die. So yeah, motion layout, Mark. Yeah, motion layout. Don't get me started with motion layout. Everything is fine until everything breaks. And
Isn't
then you
that
don't
life
know
of a
what to do.
coder, though?
Yeah, but motion layout lately is playing very, very, very nasty with me. So fingers crossed I can use Compose in the future.
I think it's just motion layout doesn't feel loved enough, and it's showing.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Maybe
So
sorry, Ivan. I'll let you go in a second. I just wanted to point out that
please.
a few minutes ago, Chris wrote something in the chat that I think is quite important, which is the concept of right enough, and that's something that should be very familiar to coders. But Chris, do you want to expand on that a bit, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's I think some choices designers make are, I think, like I said, we iterate a lot within things, but then we also get feedback. And I think part of the workflow is that you could spend hours or days trying to like get a card right, but at the end of the day, it's like there may be an entire design system or a whole set of screens that you have to go design. And so part of it is like you can pick something that just looks good enough and you can kind of move on. And I think what part of the reason you get feedback is because maybe that card is just good enough, and tweaking the spacing, it's nice to have, but not necessary. And I think part of overall with design in general is like it is at least for software, you're interacting with it. And so sometimes the visual appearance doesn't have to be perfect as long as the user like understands what they're looking at and if they understand how to use the thing that they're looking at and they can interact with it, then I think that's equally as important. Because you could iterate on the visual styles for eternity, but at some point there's marginal the return on investment, that it's diminishing returns. And so I think, yeah, design is never perfect. And I think I always tell designers that I talk to, like, design is never done either. It's done enough for, whatever deadline you all need to make. But, you can always go back and tweak the card more, or you might come back to that card and totally throw it out and be like, actually, I want to go with a completely different concept, like different shape, different layout, different spacing. Yeah, so sometimes it being right enough is actually just fine.
If this is something that you always have to think about trade-offs, like Mark is writing, right? I mean, especially when it comes to pet projects. I mean, from a professional point of view, maybe you have a bit more like a buffer to do things. But if you just code over the weekend, you really need to be practical and in a very brutal, pragmatic way, right? I have I have probably just a handful of hours and I want to move forward with the project. How can I put some value in and, not having something that looks horrible at the end of the weekend? I'm still working on that, but you get the point. So I really can relate with it's good enough, right? And if even better, as Lian said, if people can use it and they like it, you need to just accept it. Okay, that's it. Okay, so that's good enough.
That was crisp, but I also agree. I don't want to take credit for that. I agree wholeheartedly.
This is teamwork, so we're all taking credit for everything. No, sorry, that would be me stealing the credit from you folks, so I won't do that. That's how management works, I'm slowly becoming a manager.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're on that trajectory now. So you're coding less and less and less, and my team or their fault.
At least I don't I take the blame for things that don't work.
Fair enough.
But I actually have another question. Well, I have two questions. The first one is for, I guess, both of you, Chris and Liam, and it is, so we have talked about the typeface, and also I think we should probably, hi Hugo, we should probably clarify what is the difference between a font and a typeface, because I think 99% of humans don't really know what is that difference. Thanks for the sub, Hugo.
Is it a difference?
Yes!
Is there a difference?
So maybe we can start with that. It's not really a question, but maybe we can start with that.
I have an answer. Go for it. I have a really abstract answer, but I will try to make it concrete. I would say that a font is an instance of a typeface. It is like one example of a typeface. So that can mean it's like a specific weight or style, like regular or italic or something like that. And the typeface is the full range of possibilities that you could have, like from that typeface's skeleton. So in theory, there's a design space that contains like many different instances of one type family. But in reality, you get like a few fonts, and that is the typeface that you get.
So for a software engineer, a font is essentially the file, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's a good way to think about it.
That gets more complicated when you start talking about variable fonts, maybe. But let's not get there yet.
Mark has
there's a question from Mark that I think is a good follow-up to that.
There's a question by Mark.
What's the difference between a font family and a typeface? This one I'm a little less clear on, because in my mind, I tend to use typeface and font family interchangeably, but I guess the division that I would draw personally, and I'm not saying this is right, but this is my opinion, is that the font family is the set of instances of a typeface that is available. So like a typeface for me is more conceptual and could include instances of the typeface that don't actually exist on paper. Font family is the ones that you get bundled as the typeface.
Got it. Yeah. I also know that there's different opinions on exactly what is a font, what is a typeface, what is a font family, and it kind of depends who you ask to a degree. It's one of those things, right?
There are many of those things, yes.
We have another question in the chat from Maya. I don't know if either of you can answer that, but why is there no bold in the font family XML? Is that because font weight is orthogonal to the style? So to italic and regular, so font can be italic, bold, regular, bold, or italic, regular, and regular, regular.
What are you talking about, Sebastiano?
I agree with what you just said, but I don't know the answer to the
How?
question.
Doesn't make any sense. I mean, what's regular? How can you agree
So,
on
like-
that?
Normal? I don't know.
Yeah, it's because okay, but you can have like the regular upright version of the type of the font, or you can have the italic version, and like each of those can have weights of their own.
So in my mind, and it might be wrong, but in my mind, the mental model is this. There are different dimensions that a typeface can take. One of them is the style, where it's regular or italic. There might be small caps, there might be something else. And then another dimension that is entirely separate is the weight of the font. So any of those variants of that font, of the typeface, can have a different weight. And I think that is particularly obvious when you start talking about variable fonts. And maybe we can cover.
This is exactly what I was typing in the chat.
We can cover that a second. Maybe I think it makes sense given it's a big thing in Android 12. So, like, I was so excited when I saw that. I was like, yes!
Yes. Okay, so I would love to talk about this. Variable type. So remember how I said like a font is one instance of a typeface, and a typeface exists within a design space? If you think about like a variable font where you might have theoretically like sliders or a range of values that you can choose from in terms of like various axes like weight, grade, optical size, those kinds of things. Those are all like dimensions that run parallel or intersect with each other at various points. And the variable font that you can get is like a subset of that entire design space. So I guess I would think of it as like I don't want to like say something incorrect, but like my understanding of color space, like a subset of all possible colors that is contained in one place where we can render colors. That's like a variable type is like part of the design space of all possible designs of a given typeface.
I pulled up a page, like first Google result for variable fonts, because I think it makes it easier to visualize what a variable font is. Instead of having discrete values for the dimensions, as Leon was mentioning them, you have a continuum, and you can literally just change some parts, some characteristics of the fonts on a continuous scale. And you can see, like, for example, there is no bold. Like, there is the convention that bold is it 500? No, 600? I never remember. Thank you.
It depends on the typeface.
Of course.
But let's say this is bold in a old school font where every weight would be in a separate file. You would have one file that is at this weight, one file that is at this weight, and one file that is at this weight. But with the variable font, you have one file that contains the information to interpolate. So you can have, instead of having weight 100, 200, 400, 500, 800, you can have literally, I don't know, 421. You like 421, you can do 421. So yeah.
So basically, but would it make? I mean, from a just person that doesn't know anything about this and is seeing this for the first time, wouldn't? I mean, is this better, or it complicates things when you want to use the font? I mean, it should simplify, right? Because you can programmatically tell the font.
I don't know.
What are you doing, Sebastian?
There's a variable that is called pump. I had to try it, dude.
So I mean, from a like day by day point of view, the usual thing is that they give me like a bunch of files. I put them in the folder and I try to map them in XML. So I don't really have to care about. With a variable font, what would I get? I will get probably just one file, and then I programmatically instruct the font to be heavier or italic, or how does it work? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I like Chris, you can speak to this too, but I think like variable fonts ask a lot more from designers in exchange for the possibilities they offer. So like if you think about something like bottom nav or nav rail or something, the label space that you have on those components is super small. But if you have something like a width axis in your typeface, then you would be able to localize that to German no problem, because you can condense the width and therefore like fit more letters.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think
And
I think variable fonts. One thing I think that's been tough in the past is text animation, like animating between weights and making it look really smooth. Actually, Android 12 has a really great text animation on the lock screen, which I believe is using variable fonts. But that transition, I think, is much harder to pull off prior to variable fonts. And so I think that also kind of unlocks that. And as Liam said, I think the power of it is like, yeah, depending on where your UI is and how much space you have, you can, at runtime change it so that it can adjust accordingly with the space you have available. And so that can go everything from the strings you have, like the labels, to like if you're using, actually, I think if, some people use font icons, and I think font icons have weights as well. So that's, I think, powerful. And I think, yeah, it definitely gives designers a lot more precision with font weights, is because sometimes there's between like I think there's always this challenge between semi-bold and bold, and it's like sometimes either one doesn't work for a designer, and they're like, could I pick something like right in the middle? And without variable fonts, I think it's you don't have that discreteness, like units of 50 or 10.
and you need a specific font, right? I mean, they are not all variable. I mean, for Roboto, like the default font, I mean, you need to pick a specific one, and that's also one of the questions that I had in mind for this talk. I mean, what would you suggest to somebody that is starting like a pet project? Should I try to find like a fancy font that maybe eventually I will learn how to leverage, or should I stick to the basic one because that's good enough? And then having Sebastiano busting my oh no, this thing looks horrible, and I was like, oh, let's put some fancy font in there. I mean, if you have to suggest somewhere to start from, somebody that doesn't know anything about typography, I know that there is like endless possibilities for you as well. I mean, probably for me, never, but for you, it's endless. But it's also overwhelming for somebody like me. So, what would you suggest to, not get scared? Because that's my main concern. Because I don't know, I can do Kotlin, I can do a lot of stuff, and then you feel very, very uncomfortable because you don't know, right? And at some point you have like an emotional pushback, and then say, fuck it, I don't want to know anything about typography. I'm gonna stick to the basic one, and I don't care, because that's basically how it works, right? The brains you just go in protection. But I want to have a safe step, that takes me a bit out of my comfort zone, and then, it gives me a bit. What will you suggest?
I would suggest thinking about, I think looking at variable type, especially like a variable typeface that's as sophisticated as like recursive, which I mentioned in the chat, can be really intimidating because you have so many options. But I think my advice would be not to approach it as like options that you have to take advantage of, but rather things that you can use as a tool if you need it. Like these are the possibilities, like if you find that you need it, but maybe you don't. And maybe like playing with weight values is a good starting point to get a feel for like how the typeface works and whether it's accomplishing what you want. Like just in a basic sense of like separating information types. And then from there, maybe you can try something else stylistically that like enhances whatever you're trying to do.
Like they're suggesting if I end up with Comic Sans, probably is it gonna be okay, or should I be stopped or like put down or just take away the computer? But I like the suggestion. You know, you don't have to rush it. You can think that you have a tool, and if you have a problem, you can probably you can fix with the tool. You just start learning the tool.
Right.
Yeah, I think too. I don't have the most scientific process of picking fonts, but I think actually Liam said it really well in one of his material design streams. Sometimes you just go to Google Fonts and look at things and just pick a font and see how you feel about it. Like, what emotions does the font evoke? Like, I think for me, fonts that like have more rounded shapes tend to be more playful. And I think if your app is, depending on what your app is, it's like, is it a serious app? Is it a playful app? You can kind of go from there. And I think the other thing too I've done as well, which is also helpful for inspiration, is like sometimes I'll just go to like Dribbble or whatever website, and depending on what the category of my app is, I'll just type like, what do designers who are making like library book apps, what is their like style that they're going after? You can kind of see in the overall like the style people are going for. I think that's why sometimes it's funny, like fortnightly, I think Sebastiano, you said looks like New York Times, but I think that's interesting because I think part of so many newspapers had this very clear serif style, years ago. And so anytime you're making like a news app, it's like when you see serif, it kind of like brings people back to that idea. And so I think sometimes typeface has history or baggage with it as well, and which can be good and bad. And so I think that's why it kind of just depends what your app is about. And so I think the font also has to kind of complement that. And I think funny enough about Comic Sans, sometimes I use it in mockups to clearly tell people who are looking at it that this is not to be taken seriously.
Nice, like the wireframe, wireframe. Like this is
Communication
not the
tool,
final
yeah.
design.
I think that's genius.
Yeah.
Can I quickly throw out a hot take? I want to start seeing more serif typefaces in interface design, and not just for news apps.
Yes.
Because I think serif typefaces have a readability advantage, and I suspect that the reason that sans serif system fonts have become so normalized is because we didn't have enough pixels to render the nuance of serif styles. And now I feel like we do. So let's do it.
We can do better. We need to do better. I like, Chris, what was the website that you mentioned apart from the Google Font website? There was another website that you mentioned for inspiration. How was it?
Oh, Dribbble.
Dribbble? Okay.
Yeah, there's many funny memes about it in designer land, but Dribble's one of them. There's another one actually.
Behance, maybe?
What is it called? It's no, it's Mobin. Mobin.design. It's like Mobbin. 2 B's, yeah.
No. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no G.
Yeah, on the background, I'm just pulling up the.
I don't want to know if I don't want to check if it exists, Sebastiano. So please don't.
I think the difference between Mobin and Dribbble is all, they're not necessarily real. They're just designs that designers come up with that are inspirational. But Mobin are screenshots from real apps.
Nice.
So Mobin's kind of nice because you could find a category of an app and kind of see, what people are kind of gravitating towards in terms of a style. And oftentimes you'll see really interesting typefaces in there.
Sebastian, just out of curiosity, let's say that somebody would like to search for like a settings page, for an Android app. Would I be able to search for? Always, like, hypothetically, if somebody needs a setting page in their app, will they be able to find it here, for instance? What should I do? Like, select Android
let me
and
share
themes and
the screen
settings,
with everyone.
things like that, and I get.
Okay, so let's try and do screens and do settings, maybe.
Setting and preferences.
Oh no.
Oops,
Oh no, .jpg.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah, no.
While we look for this,
Okay, so
something that I want
Anyway.
to add to the conversation about getting inspiration from places like this, like, I think a really important step is, once you find something that appeals to you, asking the question of like why it is the way that it is, and seeing if you can figure out the rationale behind it. Sometimes, if designers are very nice, they'll put their rationale with the design, and then you can just read about it.
Oh,
But
nice.
try to see if you can like figure it out, and I think that's like super helpful for, one, learning these concepts, but also like figuring out if it's the right thing for you when you see something cool.
I don't know if it's still a thing, but in the topic of material design, there used to be, like, it was maybe more popular than it is today, but it still exists. There's a website called Material App, or maybe now it's called App Labs, and they also have, like, specifically for material design. So if you're looking for something within the material design system, then that is a good source of inspiration as well. That is more targeted than other websites that may be more targeted, like may represent iOS interfaces more than Android ones. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough.
Just to bring back 1 second, the point on Comic Sans. I know we all love to hate Comic Sans, but if you consider what it was created for, it actually worked very well for that. And maybe this kind of brings us to the topic of misusing fonts. So using a font that is not made for the purpose that you wanted that you want to use it for. Because in the beginning, Comic Sans was created for an application called Microsoft Bob in the 90s. That was kind of like a comic book take on your computer. It was an early attempt to create a more user-friendly interface for Microsoft Windows. And in that context, I mean, you still get tired of it at some point, but it works. It's a very expressive typeface, and it worked well for that. And then the second it started being included in Windows and being used for literally everything, then that combined with the fact that it has a very strong identity that made it so that everyone now hates it for that reason.
Do you think that if Microsoft had communicated the rationale for the design to people clearly, that things would have gone the way they did?
I don't know, because at the end of the day, the type designer that designed Comic Sans did explain several times that what the goal was, but maybe it was too little too late. I don't know.
Yeah. I also think, like, in terms of using a font in a way that it's not intended, I say go for it as long as you have rationale and it's accomplishing the intent of the design. Like, you could use Comic Sans somewhere in a really successful and compelling way.
Yeah, I think the example that Mark put in the chat earlier, where someone had a freemium app that after a trial period would force you to see the user interface in Comic Sans. I think that's a valid use case, although probably you need to acquire a license for that. And that's kind of like another thing that maybe we should touch upon, which is, just because you can find a font file on the internet, it probably doesn't mean you can necessarily use it for that, because font licensing is complicated.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Who wants to bite?
Yeah. I just want to say, like, pay for your fonts. Like, we have a messy and complicated licensing system that like doesn't match the reality of how fonts are used, in my opinion. It feels more like you're buying a physical good than a file or a program, which fonts are. But at the same time, like, the amount of work that goes in, especially for independent foundries, to create something that works and that you can use and that also is like made for the purposes that you want to use it for, is a lot of work. Typefaces can take years to develop. So pay
Or
for your
use
fonts.
Google Fonts, where you know you can use those fonts for whatever you want. If you
Yeah.
don't have a budget, that's a good place.
Yeah, there's thousands of fonts that folks have designed in the open as open source, and you can use those, no problem.
Yeah, actually, on the topic of open source, one of my favorite foundries is actually, well, one of my favorite open source foundries is called League of Movable Type, and they have been in the space for a long time. And they also have a very interesting podcast where they discuss a lot of typography nerdiness things. So if you're interested in that, I can also recommend it. It's called the Weekly Typographic. It's very entry level. I understand it, so it's fine. They're mostly talking about news. They talk about licensing sometimes. They talk about toolkits that people might use and stuff like that. So just a personal recommendation. Oh yeah, by the way, Ivan just started the giveaway for the DroidCon London ticket in the chat. So if anyone wants a DroidCon London ticket, you have to type the word Basil in the chat in the next, I don't know how many minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 5 minutes. We're running. No rush. I think probably they want the stickers.
Well, if you come to London, you get the holo stickers. Otherwise, who knows?
Yeah, that's also that's the unfortunate situation that also I'm living in. Anyway, Seb, any other question?
I had another one earlier. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh yes, I think we have talked about weights. We've talked about different typefaces. We have talked about the role that typography has in transmitting information about the hierarchy of the data of the stuff that you're showing on screen. But there's another element that is kind of like the element in the room, which is color. And color also ties in to another thing that I would like to touch upon before we close, which was briefly mentioned in passing, that is kind of like Comic Sans redeeming feature, which is accessibility. So maybe you can cover those two things before we are done with today's stream.
Is it?
Sure.
Is it a thing? I mean, is it like a real thing?
Apparently.
But how does it work? I know I mean, because they were mentioning dyslexic people, right? So I know the condition, but can a font help you on that? Like, this is like another very, very, very closed answer for like, is it the real thing? Can a font increase the readability at that level that, you know, helps with a condition like dyslexia?
I think what I would say about that is that I can't comment specifically because I have no experience with that, but I know that there are several typefaces that have claims to aid with that due to like various geometric features of the font and things like that. So claim is out there. I have not read the literature.
Yeah, at a high level, what I've read in articles but not papers, so take it with a pinch of salt, is that having a font that has a irregular rhythm and very accentuated features makes it easier for people that have dyslexia to tell the different letters apart. That's the general theory that is behind this kind of fonts, and why Comic Sans is said to be helpful to people with dyslexia, is that the letters in Comic Sans are all very different from each other and very open.
I see. Well, it
Someone's
can make
pasted
sense, actually.
Pasted a link in the chat for folks to check out.
Thank you, Maya.
I will say that at least, like outside of that context, I know that in Latin scripts, at least, a lot of the way that we read text is based on the shape of the word overall. So there are a lot of fonts that make adjustments to things like the X height or the ascenders or descenders, basically like the metrics of the font to try to emphasize the shape of the word. So I think like type does have a lot of parameters that you can tweak that are pretty powerful, I think.
Wow. I mean, I like this kind of stuff, like, because something so obscure for me, like typography, can actually have an impact so huge on somebody else's life, right? So there is a lot of stuff. I mean, thank you for the link, Maya, because now I want to understand how, because accessibility is always overlooked.
Yeah,
How
that's
is it in
correct.
English, Sebastian?
Yeah.
Overlooked, is it?
Yeah.
Because, but with Compose, we are also getting more involved with accessibility, things like content description for images and things like that. So it is nice to probably learn more about this kind of things, right? How can you help users? Because maybe you can reach like a niche of users, and then you get popular because you cared about that niche of users, right? I mean, it could be an opportunity for an indie developer to actually make a successful app, right? You care about an aspect of somebody else's life, and then you create something nice, like like little momentum for your app.
It might also be
Nice.
important. I
So
just wanted to add, if your audience specifically has some sort of unifying factor that might make it better for them to have, bigger text, clearer contrast between the text and the background, using certain fonts instead of others. It just like you should know your audience, and it's always nice if you can to offer the possibility for people you don't need to offer things like change font size, because the Android OS will do that for you. But even the ability for people, maybe you have a reading app, you have a ebooks reading app, you can change the font in an ebook. Maybe you want to offer an override for people to say, I actually prefer reading a sans serif or a serif, or maybe Open Dyslexic, something like that. So this sort of thing it probably doesn't take you that much effort, and is going to help a lot of people that are going to appreciate your effort and reward you for it.
Yeah, and I think kind of tying together Liam's hot take on serif fonts, I think, and with color, I think one of the challenges in the past, which does relate to contrast as well, is if you pick, colors that are saturated or are just brighter for a font color, because if they're serifed, and because we didn't have the highest resolution displays before, you would have these parts of the letters so close to each other that they would actually start to vibrate, and it'd be a little hard. It'd actually be pretty difficult to read, even for someone who may not have an issue with reading small text. So I think color choice, maybe as displays get better, and then I think serif fonts will definitely be more out there. But then also I think color choices could change, though I think there is that normal or the standard rule, which is you should have the 4.5:1 color contrast between the background and the foreground.
Yeah. I think that's a huge point though, because especially like in a dark theme or something, this is kind of like a fun fact that I really like, is that, you know, in printing, when you're using ink on paper, frequently like special shapes would need to be made in the font to account for the way that ink moves on the paper, because it would bleed from some of the small features and could actually change the shape of the letter form. And in the same way in dark theme, if you're using like a purely white type color on a black background, like the light, because the letters are what's illuminated, will appear to like blur out a little bit as well, which is why like type, first of all, the background doesn't need to be black and the type doesn't need to be white. And I would say the same goes for the reverse as well. Like if you think about like extremely high contrast, reading that for long periods of time, that's something that you like feel building up, especially in like a reading app.
So much to learn.
As always, Ivan. I thought
Yeah,
after
talking
6
about
months you'd be
overwhelming.
used to it.
Talking about
There,
Mamma mia.
I was gonna say I did run into just today, which is related to DroidCon London. I ran into I would say a typographic design choice that was not good. Actually, I think you can pull it up, but it kind of maybe
Suboptimal.
summarizes all
Do
of this.
you mean an unfortunate choice?
An unfortunate choice, yeah.
Yes.
I think if you go to get tickets, if you scroll down, there's like a get tickets
yeah, one second.
button
Let me share it
somewhere.
with everyone. Okay.
Oh. Yeah, that get tickets now. button.
Sorry,
Oh,
I passed
whoops.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think it goes
Yeah.
to Eventbrite, which now when you click the green button, tickets, yes, this pop up. So I had a promo code for my speaker ticket, but I just scrolled right past that first link. If you even see it.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
now I see it. I was like, okay, where do I put the promo code? And I was like, because you usually look for a field, right? Somehow.
A field, or it's at the top. It's just the placement and the size and the color. I guess is okay because it's a link, but it just, if you're looking for an option to pay, you would just scroll right past it.
I have done the same thing.
I think I think because there is the gray text has not enough contrast, so I'm so focused on trying to read from the gray text that I completely missed the enter promo code. I think this is at least my impression.
I think in this case it's also a problem of maybe layout. Like this is not where I would expect to find that thing. I would expect it maybe down here or maybe on the side.
Yeah.
Definitely not up here. So yeah.
Yeah, and as Liam had said, the text, the type is the interface. And so in this case, it's like it's very important, and you just went right past it.
I think we have one last question for today from Mark in the chat, which is probably for you, Chris, given you're the Android Studio person here, which is Android Studio also has some color blindness preview checks, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. In the layout editor XML preview, there's a little blue layer icon where you can select different color deficiencies to see what your layout could look like from those perspectives. And I think it's also in Compose as well, but I have to double check if it's there. But there is also some general accessibility tooling in Android Studio as well that I think on your layout XML files you can run this accessibility test framework report on it, and it will actually report back a bunch of accessibility issues, not just color contrast, but things like needing content description.
I think text size as well, too. Like if it's too small.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions from the chat or anything else that you want to talk about, I think we are at a good point to wrap it up. What do you say?
Wrap it up.
Okay, there is a very important question from the chat. I think this is for Liam.
I think
That's bait. That's
this
bait.
is Yasmin asking, who was your favorite manager? I mean, I feel like this is a trap to get me live on air saying Yasmin is my favorite manager. My actual manager, especially considering that we're meeting right after this.
The delay. I love it. I love it. Yeah, this is. I guess it's gonna be an interesting day for you, Liam. I don't want.
We'll see what happens.
Okay, well, we will free you up for your meeting with your manager then, Liam. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, if you're late to the next meeting, on the other hand, your manager knows why. And yeah, thank you very much. It's been super interesting for me, and I hope for everyone else as well. I'm very happy that we managed to start this series together, and I'm looking forward to the next episodes in which we're gonna cover many other topics, because as you might have understood, it's a rabbit hole of rabbit holes that never end.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Have a good one, everyone. See you on Sunday with Mark, and see you in 2 weeks with Chris for the next episode on design. Have a good one. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye, everyone.